welcome to the show. We're going to do another show today on timelines, timeline jumping, and specifically my tips for how to jump to a timeline that aligns with the life and the future that you want to have. Before we get into that, I want to address something interesting that has come up with some feedback I've gotten for these types of videos that I've been making. And there was a request, or a couple of them, like, why aren't you talking about crypto more? Why are you talking about all this other, like, more spiritual stuff? And to me, they are the same thing. I am addressing the same topic from two different directions. And if you understand what money really is, and that includes digital assets, cryptocurrencies, and our fiat currencies, all money is energy. And you can make the argument that everything is energy, but let's just stick to money for this moment. Money is energy. Energy is time. Energy is value. And we use money as a placeholder to exchange energy. So for example, if you have a job where you get a paycheck, you expend energy at your job, right? You're either physically doing things, you're using like your mental energy, or probably a combination of both of those things. So in exchange for you giving X amount of energy, you receive hopefully a comparable amount of energy as compensation. It is an exchange of value, an exchange of energy. Money is used as a placeholder or a representation of energy that we use then to take that energy and we go out and buy stuff or pay for things with it. On the spiritual side, if you want to be in a position where your financial situation is different, or you don't like something about your life, when you understand that fundamentally everything around you is a manifestation of energy of some sort, you can take more control over the reality that you live in. If you watch the video that I did about a week ago after XRP Las Vegas, I used the example that Brad Kimes manifested that event. And I explained to you like how it happened. And so manifesting isn't this like made up like fantasy idea. And it's interesting because I've been a student of manifestation for many years now. But for the first couple of years, like I didn't talk about it with anyone unless I knew for sure they were like-minded. It was something I felt like I had to keep secret, that people were going to think I'm a little bit nuts or crazy. But the more I have studied this and the more I've just gotten used to it and the more examples I have seen of things that I have manifested into my own reality, in addition to things, I've watched other people manifest, I really have no doubt at this point that the reality we all live in is a function of our beliefs and our thoughts and our actions, and we literally create our own world. So if this doesn't resonate with you and you think I'm nuts, like you don't have to watch this video. Please go on and do something else. But if you do understand that at some level, we are the creators of our own reality and creators of our own world, and the things that you do kind of mirror back to you some sort of energy that creates a reality. The other interesting criticism I get this is more on Twitter, but sometimes in YouTube, about some of these topics related to kind of creating your own world, is some criticism from kind of the Christians about God and how God is the creator of it. That is an interesting debate that I might get into someday. I really see them as the same, and that while I'm talking about jumping timelines and manifesting, I'm fully aware that there is a far more sophisticated intelligence that is guiding me and helping me. If you want to call that God or a higher self or a spirit guide, to me, those are labels that humans put on things because we like labels and we need labels to describe them to other people. So I'm not going to get into an argument about whether or not, me taking control over my own reality is somehow like not in alignment with the belief that God is the creator of our world. So if you're going to put some comments in about that, go for it. But like, I've kind of been through that already. All right, let's get to it. So we're going to talk about timeline jumping. We're going to talk about the power of it, the importance of intention. I have some notes today. How to beat the game, because I still think we're living in a simulation that's kind of like a metaverse game. And every time I kind of come across a weird situation, when I look at it through the lens of the game, it makes perfect sense. And I'm able to navigate through it much more quickly and more easily than if I start to feel like this is all really real. We talk about the heart versus the mind, and then how can you manifest the reality you want to live in, which many of us, if we've been in the digital asset space, you're part of the XRP community, like hey, let's manifest that, flip the switch, and let's be on the other side of this new financial system where things operate very differently. All right, first thing is intention. So as you go through this process of manifesting, you have to learn that honesty is non-negotiable. So if you want something and you pretend to yourself that you want it for one reason, but really you want it for another reason, that's going to be a problem. Like, you can't trick this system. You can't lie, you can't fake it. The actual genuine intention that you have with something is extremely important. I have found that when I manifest things that not only benefit me, but benefit more people, that intention is like amplified and it comes to me more quickly. That doesn't mean that you can't manifest something that only benefits you. I just find that like the collective energy is like an amplifier that brings things better. So my point here is that when you decide that you want to manifest something specific, be very clear about the intention. Like, what is it that you really want to have happen here? And why do you want this? And the more pure and genuine and loving that intention is, the easier it is, or the easier it is to manifest. If you have mixed intentions or you have inner conflict about something, like you think you want something, but really you're not sure, that's when all sorts of things, problems come in that usually are lessons that you need to learn before that manifestation can come up. So what I'm going to sort of summarize is that no matter it is what you want, whether it's a material item or a particular situation in your life, like a relationship or something, or you want more time, like, get clear on what that is and be very, very honest about why you want it, because the intention matters considerably. There's another analogy that I love when manifesting. This actually comes from a book called Transurfing, which is a monster of a book. Interestingly, considering how long it is, I actually did read this book twice because I think it is the most clear and easy to understand kind of framework for this. And one of the things about intention is that intention is different than a wish or a dream or a hope. If you wish for something, in the back of your mind, we believe that it's not that practical or realistic or likely to happen. Like, I remember being a little girl, I would like look out my bedroom window at night and I would see a star, and I kind of had this little like starlight, star bright, first star I see tonight, wish I won't, wish I might, make this wish come true tonight. I used to look out the window and do that all the time. And the thing about this wish was that it was something, they were usually things that I felt like I couldn't have or weren't realistic or weren't practical. So my subconscious believed that this was not something that I either deserved or was likely to happen. Alternatively, if you were to place a request to the universe with the same energy of ordering food, like from like, let's say you called up a restaurant and you're like, hey, I'd like a pizza. That is a request and it's not a wish. I'm not like begging the restaurant or hoping that the restaurant will like accept my order and make this pizza. Like, if you call up a restaurant, order a pizza, there's usually no doubt that the restaurant will accept the order and cook the pizza for you. Like, this is the thing about intention too, is when you set an intention, there isn't this like hope stuff, which is actually rooted in fear. So if you wish for something to be true, but you're really not sure if you're good enough or it's going to happen or whatever, that means that there's some kind of fear rooted in that, which we want to let go of all of that for this. So back to my food ordering analogy. You call up the restaurant, you order the pizza, and then you either do a couple of things. One is you can just sit back and wait and maybe assume the restaurant will deliver this pizza, which could happen. Or you can say, you know what? I'm going to go get the pizza. No big deal. I'm not going to make a fuss out of it. I'm not going to stress about it or worry about it. I'm just going to get in my car and I'm going to drive to the restaurant and I'm going to get the pizza. If I have to pay for it or do some kind of value exchange, as we talked about. And there isn't this like doubt or stress or worry generally about going to a restaurant to pick up pizza. However, if we kind of apply this analogy to the broader manifestation of things like money or other types of more life altering things relative to a pizza, what can happen is there can be fear. And so if I'm proverbially driving to the restaurant to get my manifestation and I'm scared that I might like be a really cautious driver and like be constantly checking the Google Maps every second and worrying and like checking to see if I have email confirmations. And there's just a lot of anxious type behavior that is implying this is not a done deal, that I still have doubt that this pizza will actually be cooked for me and be available for me to get. And that type of fear repels because your subconscious doesn't really understand that when fear is present, that you still want the thing. If the subconscious feels fear, it's like, we don't want the pizza. We're scared of the pizza. We don't think we can get the pizza. So let's just stay away from this pizza. And you end up pushing away and repelling these manifestations. So instead, if you get in the car and you pull up your Google Maps, you have your directions. When people talk about being guided by intuition and being guided by God or higher self, what that means in this analogy is they get in the car, they see the instructions, and they just follow them and go get it. What the mind likes to do when it gets scared is it starts to worry and it like will doubt the Google Maps directions and say, you know what? One time I went that way and there was a car accident there and I had to wait in traffic for all this time. So I'm going to go a different way. It might be longer, but I had this, I want to be in control of this. So I'm going to not repeat a previous pathway that I got burned in, even though the traffic might not be there at all. That previous car accident you were part of, whatever, or got stuck in traffic on, might have been years and years ago. So instead of just following the directions, following intuitive guidance you have, humans, and I've done this many times, we'll drive around a different way, a very long way, thinking we can figure it out better than the guidance can do it. And you kind of doubt the direct path that you've been given. And there's also kind of just anxiety and fear that maybe causes you to not use Google Maps at all and just say, you know what, I'm going to just figure it out how to get there on my own. And you just start driving and you have no idea where the restaurant is. And that doesn't mean that the pizza isn't there ready for you. It means you have not figured out what are the right actions and steps you need to take to literally get to this restaurant to pick it up. And I understand I'm using a metaphor here and you're like, I don't care about pizza. I want to, manifest something else. The concept still applies that whenever you set the intention, I want to manifest this thing, you are in almost all cases going to have to take some kind of action to go and get it, to bring it towards you. So if you want to start a business, for example, and you set this vision for it, like you're going to have to do things. Like you're going to have to call people, you're going to have to set up websites, you're going to have to send email or whatever. You can't just kind of sit back and like a victim and expect all these things to just come to you without doing any action. Now, everything here is balanced and there's a dance between trying too hard and chasing something and allowing it to happen. So this is why I love this metaphor with Google Maps, is that if I get in the car and I know I got to go to the restaurant and I know I have a tool that will guide me there, and I know the tool will give me a very direct path, there's no desperation or chasing in that. I'm not like trying really hard to get there quickly in that metaphor. And so there's a surrender saying, you know what, I know that I don't remember the best way to get to this restaurant, so I'm going to rely on my guidance, my Google Maps to get me there. I'm not going to be second guessing and questioning the directions at every turn. You can if you want, but that just is a waste of energy in some cases to be doubting the guidance that you get. So that's the idea with intention, is to make your order, be aware that you're probably going to have to do some things. You're not making a big deal out of it. There isn't this energy of like wishing and hoping that implies it probably might not work out. So that's a fear-based thing. It's just a non-emotional, hey, I ordered a pizza, got to go get it. I'll be back in 10 minutes. And you just kind of do it. I mean, one of the enemies of manifestation is overthinking. We're going to get into the heart and the mind in a second, but when you overthink things, we sometimes can make up excuses and make up barriers that did not exist. And we know how powerful thought energy is. So if you all of a sudden start thinking about all these barriers or, obstacles in between you and getting this pizza, then you might end up like actually manifesting those obstacles. So you're like, oh my God, I'm psychic. I have a self-fulfilling prophecy. These obstacles were here. I was worried they'd be here. Well, you literally manifested them. Okay. Next thing we're going to talk about is this idea of beating the game, and how do you kind of get from where you are to another timeline. So let's use the example of even something like NESARA or a flip the switch, where we get this new financial system. You know, I've been in some groups of people where we've been talking about this stuff for several years now. And I remember very vividly, it was like in March, I think it was probably a year ago, a little over a year ago. I was making some plans to go somewhere, and we had like some, you know, intelligence from someone that the flip the switch and the EBS and lockdown, whatever, was going to be this weekend. And there was like legitimate fear about whether or not I should cancel these plans. And so I got to the point where I stopped worrying about dates and stopped like trying to anticipate how imminent some of these changes were. And I think part of it had to do with this idea of manifestation, and that I wasn't really clear what life was like on the other side of these events. You know, after, you know, if we wake up in a post-NESARA world where our, you know, scarcity is kind of removed and people no longer are forced to have jobs that they don't really want simply because they need the money. I mean, this is a whole fascinating topic to talk about. Interestingly triggers some people like flat earth type things, which I'm not a flat earther, by the way. But I am pretty confident that I do not know with certainty what the shape of the earth is, because I have not been to space to see it. And I'm pretty sure we've been told a whole lot of lies about things, and that's one of them that's on the list of potential lies. However, back to NESARA, or this idea that we're going to wake up one day and we're going to be on the other side of a world where corruption is no longer prevalent and scarcity is no longer pushed on us on a daily basis, and we don't have these sort of jobs where we're forced to have them in almost like a slave type capacity. If you are not clear or sure or comfortable with what life is going to be like on the other side of that, you may have fear energy that's going to push that away. In the same way, back to my metaphor about the pizza, like if you know what life is like on the other side of NESARA and you're very excited about it and very relaxed about it, like in this nonchalant way that I'm just driving to go get my pizza, that is a very different thing than having this worry and fear, which ends up making you meander and take all these long routes, and you'll get there eventually. You're just going to take a whole lot longer to do it. So back to this idea that we're living in a metaverse, it's simulation, and that all of this stuff in reality is somehow a projection of the stuff in our mind. You can use that to your advantage, and you can start to visualize and imagine, what is the world that I want to live in? What does it look like? What do I do in this life? Who do I hang out with? What do I wear? What do I eat? What kinds of hobbies do I have? And you kind of do this over and over to the point where it starts to just feel real. And it starts to feel like, of course, I'm going to live in that world. Like, why wouldn't I? If you've ever, I mean, I've done this with vacation planning. So like, I remember quite many years ago, I went on a trip to Italy with a couple of my aunts and two of my cousins. And I was the planner of this trip. And I spent almost a year planning this trip. The planning of it was probably as much fun as the actual trip itself. And what I did was, you know, I had this itinerary. I knew where we were going, and, you know, looked up the hotels and the wineries we were visiting. It was kind of a wine tasting thing. And in my mind, like, I kind of simulated the experience, not in its totality, but like little bit. One winery, kind of imagine what it'd be like to be there, certain restaurant. I mean, part of it was in Venice, so like being in gondolas and in the water. And I got to a point where I had visualized so many parts of this trip that when it came time to make decisions about, you know, where are we going, where are we staying, it was very easy for me to do that because I already knew the choices that I had made, and I just simply had to take the action, which was like book XYZ. And so that trip was absolutely manifestation. And that to me isn't even negotiable, because if I went on this trip that I planned, I had to go through this process of like seeing this itinerary and visualizing, you know, how would I go from here to here? You know, we would take trains in one place and have a driver in another place, like, you know, that kind of thing. And so when you go through the process of planning something in detail like that, you are visualizing it. And then if you end up going on that trip, you have manifested that trip. So manifesting isn't this like magical thing where things just appear out of nowhere. Like, there is an actual process. And I think what I used to discount was the power of the mind and the visualization in actually bringing those things to fruition. You know, so anyway, back to this being a game, and it's a simulation where we have the power to create what we want. Spend your time visualizing and thinking about the most perfect version of your life. I grew up in a family where there was a lot of worrying and there was a lot of discussion of these worries. And a lot of times these worries like came to be, and it was seen as like justification, rationalization for like, of course, it's a good thing we worried about this because it ended up happening. It was not clear to me at all as a kid that the focus on all of these worries literally created those things into reality. So as an adult, I'm now much more mindful of when I'm in a situation where I feel like I'm either at a crossroads or like a fork in the road, or I have to make some kind of decision, or something happens and I have to interpret it as like, is this good or is this bad? I used to kind of assume the worst and, be a little like paranoid, you could say, and be worried that like, oh, this person said this, oh, they must be mad at me, or they must not want me to do something, or there must be some sort of like negative thing here that in most cases turned out to not be true. One thing I have found that when you have interactions with other people and you feel slighted by some kind of conversation, most of the time the other person is so wrapped up in their own stuff that like the slighting thing that I interpreted wasn't really real. And that gets cleared up eventually. Like, oh, I misinterpreted that. Oh, I thought you were mad at me or were being a jerk or whatever. But that was not actually the reality of the situation. So when you're in a situation when you have this crossroads, you got to make a decision or you have to interpret something that has happened, you always have the choice to assume the best. You have the choice, the power to say, you know what, I could take this two different ways. There's like a really positive, optimistic view, kind of a love-based viewpoint, or there's more of a cynical, negative, paranoid, kind of fear-based viewpoint. Be aware that throughout the day, when these types of things happen, you always can choose the higher vibration choice. And if something comes along a day or two later and confirms the fear-based side, you know what? You can deal with that then. In many, many cases, something happens. Our mind is like in a rush to interpret, is this good or is this good for us or is this bad for us? And the default, unfortunately, for many people, and I'm recovering from this, the default is to assume the worst. And we see it as like a protection mechanism, that it's like preparing for the worst happening. And it's like a survival instinct of sorts. And we're not living in a world where like tigers are hunting us out in the field, like at least not where I am. Like there's very little physical danger threat for me. Like the stuff that I worry about is 99% in my head, not physical danger things. Now, if you are in a situation where there is a lot of physical danger around you, like hopefully you can find a solution to that. I'm just talking about the stuff that we fear and worry about that is made up in our head. It's generally in relation to other people or some kind of fear or worry. Sometimes it comes from stuff you read on the news or whatnot. And so to beat the game, the first thing is to understand that fear is like a currency used in the game to hold you back. So imagine you're playing a video game and like, I'm just going to make up a video game that might not make a lot of sense. And for some reason, there's like water all over the floor of this like game board that you're traveling through. And sometimes like the water can get really, really high and it feels like you're having to swim and you're walking through this water and it's like harder and harder. And so that is like fear. So the more fear you have, the more water is in this game and the harder it is to navigate through the game board. But when you can look at the game board and be like, hey, that fear, it's just an optical illusion in the game. I'm just not going to allow that fear to be a part of my decisions and my thoughts, but I'm just going to assume the best. I'm going to make decisions that are aligned with the best possible thing happening. I find that the water level drops and you're able to move around much more easily. Because sometimes fear is, it comes in the form of burdens. Like if you're stressed a lot, you feel like you have to do all these things, and you're not doing them enough, and it creates this stress. These are all fear-based thoughts. If you are in a situation where you are scared of something or worried about something, and these thoughts can kind of consume you and run in loops, these are all fear-based energies that can make you feel heavy. Like they really do feel like weights and burdens. A lot of times they come from traumas or negative experiences you had in the past that feel like defense mechanisms are created in response. You're like, well, I don't want that unpleasant thing to happen again. So I'm going to create a set of rules that help me avoid that thing happening. And it's this whole part of the game that's based on fear and managing fear and minimizing fear and protection from fear and protection from danger. These are all low vibration energies that the Matrix and this game love. I mean, that's what the job of the media is to instill fear in all of us so that we stay in this low vibration state. So it is an illusion, though, in that fear is an energy that you can engage with or not engage with. And you can make the decision each and every day that, you know what, I'm just not going to be in fear today. The same way that you can decide today I'm going to wear a green shirt, or today I'm going to have cereal for breakfast. Like these are all choices that you can make. And you can wake up in the morning and say, you know what, today I'm just going to align with higher vibration thoughts. And anything that comes along that attempts to make me scared or worried, I'm just going to kind of laugh at it and just swat it away like a little annoying bug. And if this sounds weird or hard, just try it one day and you probably will make it like an hour and something will happen. And the next day you'll try again and maybe you'll make it 2 hours. Then eventually it just becomes like a habit because you just get used to a thought coming in and you quickly assessing, is this a fear-based thought or is this a love-based thought? And love, if love sounds a little, hokey for you, you can be like, is this a gratitude, appreciation-based thought, like an optimistic thought, or is this some kind of negative worry thought? And just evaluate. You could just make the decision, like the same way you could say, I'm giving up sugar. You could say, I'm giving up fear. I'm just not going to participate in fear anymore. And this is probably the easiest way to rise up in the game because so many things that hold us back are fear-based. I've been an entrepreneur for many years, and the biggest obstacle I've had in my own entrepreneur journey is my own fear about things. Like there are very rarely things that I, haven't done that I didn't do them because, or I'm not making a lot of sense here. Like things that I should have done and knew I should have done, but didn't do. In almost all cases, it was because I was scared of something that wasn't even a real thing. Usually fear of being judged or not succeeding or, doing something and not really knowing what I'm doing. Navigating the entrepreneurship journey is one of the most challenging things I've ever done. And it's because fear keeps coming up over and over that manifests obstacles. So if you make the decision, I'm just not going to participate in fear anymore, see what happens and see how things change. One thing I have noticed with myself is that when I've been better and more diligent about this, because it's hard to keep it up, sometimes real, very difficult situations come along and it's really hard to do that because you're in the middle of a conflict or a drama or some kind of thing like that. But, you can wake up the day after that and say, you know what, today I'm not going to do the fear thing. What I have found is that the more I embody these higher vibrations, people around me treat me differently. So it's mirroring back that same energy. And the first time that happened, I was like, "Ooh, wow, what a weird coincidence." And then the second time, it's like, "Okay, all right." And then it's gotten to the point now where it just feels very clear to me that the energy that I put out is exactly the energy that is mirrored back to me. So if I'm spending my days sitting around worrying about stuff and I'm emitting fear, then guess what gets mirrored back to me? Other people coming to me with their fears, situations where more fear is being projected at me, and it creates this energy ping pong. And it is a choice to participate in fear-based energy ping pong in the same way that it is a choice to participate in either gratitude or love or higher vibration ping pong. So be aware that you have the power every single day to wake up and choose, what kind of ping pong do I want to play today? Do I want to play high vibe ping pong or low vibe ping pong? And you know what? Don't take my word for it. Try it. Make a conscious effort to say, I'm not going to participate in any fear-based anything. And again, the intention is real. Like you can't fake it. You actually have to really embody this and start to see how people around you treat you differently. It's remarkable. It's fascinating. This kind of ties into the idea of the heart versus the mind. So the mind is very necessary to navigate this world and navigate this game. We have to make decisions. You have to know how to do things. You have to have skills. You have to go to the store, buy food. You have to drive a car. You have to, read email. There's all these sort of functional things that we have to do. And sometimes the mind gets a little bit high on itself, and it's like, well, we obviously are in charge here. We have a bunch of things we are responsible for. We need to keep this body safe. We need to keep, our environment clean or protected or whatever. And the mind starts to think that it is the best decision maker. However, it is not, because it's controlled by the ego, and the ego is formed when we are children, and often things that happen when we're younger that may have been confusing or upsetting create a whole bunch of defense mechanisms that the mind uses to make decisions. Alternatively, we have the heart, which you can also refer to as the soul. But this is when, why meditation is so powerful, is that when you can quiet the mind and say, mind, go and take a break for now. I'm going to listen to the heart. The heart is a far more powerful guide, in my opinion and my experience. It never pushes fear. It is always pushing and advocating for what is the best thing for you in the long run. Sometimes you don't like the answer, but that's okay. Just know that the heart is always going to guide you to the golden timeline. Sometimes people think that it is God doing that, or it is a higher self. Regardless of what label you want to put on that, just know that the guidance that comes through the heart is always going to want you to do things out of a love-based energy. And it's never going to try to scare you. It might tell you to wait or slow down, which is different. That's more like a protective type energy. And if you can get into the habit of listening to the heart to make decisions and not the mind, that can be very liberating. So for some people, I find that when I'm on the cusp of being awake and asleep, most often in the morning, I'll wake up early and I'm not quite up yet. My mind isn't going yet. My mind's still sleeping. My heart and I can have a conversation about what's going on and what do we need to do. And it's a much more calm type of conversation. There's no stress or worry or talking too fast or all these kind of blah things that the mind can do when it's fully awake. I've also found there are other times in meditation, or sometimes people get amazing ideas in the shower, and that's because this sort of water energy can calm the mind and it allows the heart to be free and speak freely. So that's the other thing with timeline jumping, is that if you know where you want to go and you have the right intention, and you use that concept of intention to just order the pizza, like I explained before, and you're not making a big deal out of it or stressing or having this kind of fear it won't work out, and you listen to your heart to guide you. Heart is Google Maps. It's giving you the direct shot. The mind wants to wander around and figure out on its own, and often takes detours that are, sometimes time consuming and just a waste of energy. This can help you jump timelines to future versions of a life that you want to live in. So the timeline theory that I love, it's a little difficult to explain in words, which is why I often use metaphors. The train analogy that I've done in previous videos, where there's a whole bunch of trains. We've all been on these trains for our whole lives. I believe there is a timeline split coming up, which means that two trains that have been running in parallel that kind of feel like the same train, the tracks will be the splitting. Now, I don't think there is a literal train where we're moving on it, because time is also an interesting thing when you get into these more esoteric concepts. To me, the timeline is more about qualities that describe you. So if you think about when you were 10 years old, you had a bunch of things going on in your life and a bunch of things about you that described you. Like, you were a certain age, you wore a certain size clothes, you had a favorite, I'll make up some stuff for me. I had a favorite flower, I had a favorite, I had a pet at the time, I had a teacher at school, I had things I liked to eat for breakfast, I had things I talked about with my friends, I had, certain relationships in my life as a 10-year-old. All of those descriptors describe that timeline. And it's a timeline because those qualities described me for more than one single point in time. It might have been a whole year, for example. And we're constantly switching timelines because we're constantly growing and evolving. So the descriptors of me at age 10 are very different than the descriptors of me now. Now, because we are always moving timelines, it's kind of like a battery charger, if you know what a drip charger is. It's just drip, drip, drip. Nothing that feels dramatic or crazy. So we're not aware that these timelines are shifting because it happens so slowly. It's like watching the grass grow. You don't really notice the grass growing, but if you leave and come back, you're like, oh, wow, it grew. So it's kind of the same idea. Now, if you're looking to maybe accelerate your movement from where you are now to a future reality, you can jump timelines, which means you can experience some of these changes more rapidly so they feel more noticeable. The number one way to jump timelines is to let go of fear and just to really live and embody this higher vibration energy. You will be amazed at how differently things happen. You can also do some other things. Trips are a great way to jump timelines, especially if it's a trip where you're going to experience some kind of spiritual changes, whether that is like visiting some other culture or a place where life is just very different, or you're on some kind of adventure where you're going to have to learn things and have these experiences. I have found those types of travel are more timeline jumping oriented than like going to a resort and, drinking a bunch of drinks around the pool. Like, I don't think that is, from my experience, that has not led to the same kind of timeline jumping as, like, for example, I was in Italy last December and spent several days like on my own wandering around Florence and had just a very interesting time. And I came back a different version of me, which means I jumped timelines. I wasn't, a bunch of those descriptors changed as a result of that experience. You can also, when you feel like you are going through a timeline jump and you're looking to change something pretty significantly, things like eat different stuff for breakfast, so take a different route to where places you go regularly, listen to different music, different clothes. And what happens then is you start to disassociate with an older version of you and you see yourself as a newer version, and the bad habits and the fear-based thoughts and worries that that older version of you had, you can now distance yourself from, and they're not going to be a weight that holds you back anymore. And so these are all kind of steps and part of the process to manifest this reality that you want. So if you want to wake up one day and you're on the other side of NESARA or flip the switch or some kind of situation where you're in a different financial situation or relationship situation or whatever, first thing is to be clear about what that looks like, what it feels like, and who you are on that other timeline. What do you wear? Where do you go? Who do you hang out with? I mentioned this a few minutes ago. Get really clear on that to the point where it almost becomes an obsession, like you're preoccupied with it a lot. What happens then is that your mind starts to make decisions in alignment with that identity and not in alignment with the identity that you have now. Because if you are doing things that this future version of you would do, you literally just become that person. And then the energy you're putting out from that newer version, it will, it's a mirror, right? So the energy you put out gets mirrored back to you and it manifests the reality that you are in. I don't get into a lot of like personal stuff in these videos, but like I've gone through a lot of personal life changes in the last 6 months. And some of them have been, easy to navigate. Some of them have been more difficult, but they are all completely a function of this process of saying, you know what, there are some things in my life that I really need to change, and I can't just expect them to change on their own. So I'm going to get clear about what is important to me. Like, what kind of life do I want to live? Who do I have to be living in that life? How can I start to adopt those qualities now? And then it's amazing. Like it's been so many things that have changed, and they're all being mirrored back to me because of this newer version of energy that I'm putting out. So I don't see really a difference between some of the more financial oriented things that we talk about here and this more spiritual thing. Maybe I'm not getting into specific like digital asset names, but that's not really something that I'm focused on at this time, because I think it doesn't really matter which tokens or whatever you are looking to hold, if you understand the spiritual intention and what it is that you're looking to accomplish, and that you will be guided to the right things to manifest that reality if you learn how to listen to Google Maps and not go out and wander around on your own. So hope this helped kind of fill in some gaps. If this resonated with you, I love it. If not, it just might mean I'm not the right guide for you, or you're on a different journey. So best of luck to you. And all right, I will see y'all in the next one. Bye.